The story of Kenya is one of resilience, a tapestry woven with threads of resistance against colonial rule. One such figure is Basirian Arap Manye, the last widely recognized Orkoiyot of the Nandi people. His life intersected with a pivotal period in Kenyan history, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, hope and defiance can persevere. Basirian's life serves as a powerful lens to examine Kenya's colonial past. To understand Basirian Arap Manye, one must first understand the legacy he inherited. Koitalel Arap Samoei, his father, was not just a leader, he was a symbol of Nandi resistance, a spiritual guide who embodied the tribe's courage and determination. Koitalel's defiance of British rule, his strategic brilliance in guerrilla warfare, and his unwavering commitment to his people's well-being turned him into a legend. The colonial authorities, recognizing the threat Koitalel posed to their ambitions, orchestrated his assassination in 1905. This act, far from extinguishing the flames of resistance, ignited a firestorm of anger and resentment among the Nandi. Koitalel's name became a rallying cry, a symbol of defiance passed down through generations. Basirian, a young boy when his father was murdered, grew up under the weight of this legacy. The stories of Koitalel's bravery, his wisdom, and his unwavering commitment to his people were etched into his young mind. He understood that his father's struggle was not an isolated event, but part of a larger battle against colonial oppression that had been waged for generations. This understanding instilled in Basirian a profound sense of duty. He knew that he was not just an individual, but a custodian of his people's history, a torchbearer of their struggle for freedom. The legacy of Koitalel became the driving force behind his actions, shaping his destiny and propelling him towards a life of resistance. Nestled in the heart of Kenya's Rift Valley, the Nandi people have, for centuries, been the custodians of a rich cultural heritage and a deep connection to their ancestral lands. Known for their cattle-herding traditions, their fierce warrior spirit and their intricate social structures, the Nandi have long held a prominent place within the tapestry of Kenyan communities. Their resilience in the face of adversity, their unwavering commitment to their traditions, and their deep respect for the land form the bedrock of their identity. The arrival of British colonialists in the late 19th century disrupted the delicate balance of life in the Rift Valley. The Nandi, like many other Kenyan communities, found themselves caught in the clutches of an empire determined to exploit their land and resources. The imposition of foreign laws, the seizure of their most fertile grazing lands, and the systematic dismantling of their traditional governance structures ignited a spirit of resistance within the Nandi people. The Nandi, however, were not a people easily subdued. They resisted British encroachment with tenacity, defending their land and their way of life with courage and determination. Their resistance, however, was met with brutal force. Villages were razed, cattle confiscated, and countless lives lost in the struggle against colonial domination. Despite the hardships they faced, the Nandi spirit remained unbroken. Their story is a testament to the enduring strength of a people determined to protect their heritage and shape their own destiny. It is against this backdrop of resistance and resilience that Basirian Arap Manye's story unfolds, a testament to the indomitable spirit of the Nandi people. Basirian Arap Manye was born in 1894 in the verdant hills of Samitui, a place where the land whispered tales of bravery. He was the second son of Koitalel Arap Samoei's second wife, Taparchok Chepo Chebwai. Basirian's birth came at a time of growing unease within the Nandi community due to the arrival of British colonialists. Growing up, Basirian's early years were steeped in rich cultural traditions. He learned the art of cattle herding and the intricate rituals of his ancestors. His childhood was one of simplicity, dictated by the rhythms of nature and the bonds of family. The Nandi, known for their fierce independence, faced growing resentment due to land alienation and forced labor. Basirian's early years were marked by the warmth of community and the threat of colonialism. Barsirian's childhood was unique. He was the son of Koitalel Arap Samoe, the revered Orkoiyot. Koitalel was a symbol of Nandi resistance against British rule. Barsirian was aware of the weight his father carried. Stories of his father's exploits and strategic brilliance, his unwavering commitment to his people's well-being. Elders would gather, recounting tales of Koitalel's bravery. These stories left an indelible mark on young Barsirian. Barsirian's relationship with his father was one of deep respect. He observed his father's interactions with the community. These early observations shaped Barsirian's understanding of leadership. As Barsirian transitioned from boyhood to manhood, he underwent rigorous initiation rites, a crucial step in his development as a Nandi warrior. Inducted into the Nyongi age set, he shared a lifelong bond with his peers. These rites tested their physical and mental endurance, instilling discipline, courage and loyalty. Central to the initiation was the circumcision ceremony, marking their transition into manhood. The Nyongi age set emerged as a cohesive unit, ready to defend their community and uphold traditions. As Barsirian matured, whispers of discontent against British rule grew louder. The Nandi, known for their fierce independence, found themselves marginalized. Their traditional way of life was under threat. Confiscation of land and forced labor ignited opposition. Elders huddled, faces etched with worry, discussing tensions. Stories of injustices fueled the flames of resistance. Barsirian, drawn into clandestine meetings, listened intently. The seeds of resistance were sprouting. For a people who valued freedom, there was no choice but to resist. The year 1905 marked a profound loss for the Nandi. Koitalel Arap Samoe met Colonel Richard Meinertzagen to negotiate a truce. The Nandi hoped for peace. The meeting was at Ketbarak, a sacred place. Koitalel arrived unarmed, believing in the truce, but Meinertzagen had other plans. He came with armed soldiers, hiding their true intentions. As Koitalel extended his hand, Meinertzagen shot him. Koitalel fell, his blood staining the sacred earth. The Nandi were overwhelmed by the British soldiers. The assassination sent shockwaves through the Nandi community. Their spiritual guide and protector was gone, murdered by those who claimed to bring civilization. The news of Koitalel's assassination spread through the Nandi hills like wildfire, leaving a trail of grief, anger, and a thirst for vengeance. The colonial administration, fearing a backlash, unleashed a wave of brutal reprisals, determined to crush any further resistance. Nandi homesteads were razed to the ground, their cattle confiscated, and their sacred sites desecrated. Men, women, and children were rounded up and forced into labor camps, their lives turned upside down by the cruel hand of colonial rule. Those who dared to resist were met with swift and brutal punishment. The once vibrant tapestry of Nandi life was torn apart, their traditions trampled upon, their spirits seemingly broken. The weight of grief hung heavy over the Nandi people. The loss of their leader, their protector, their spiritual guide left a void that seemed impossible to fill. Mothers wept for their sons, wives for their husbands, and children for their fathers, their cries echoing through the valleys, a testament to the depth of their sorrow. Yet even in the face of such profound loss, the spirit of the Nandi people refused to be extinguished. The seeds of resistance, sown by Koitalel's unwavering defiance, continued to smolder beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to ignite. The memory of their fallen leader would serve as a powerful motivator, a reminder that their fight for freedom was far from over. The assassination of Koitalel Arap Samoe marked a turning point for the Nandi people. With their leader gone, the Nandi were left vulnerable. The colonial government swiftly moved to consolidate control over the Nandi heartland. Vast tracts of land were alienated from the Nandi, handed over to European settlers. The Nandi, once proud pastoralists, were reduced to squatters on their own land. The assassination of his father and the dispossession of his people left an indelible mark on Barsirian Arap Manye. The carefree days of his youth were gone, replaced by a sobering awareness of his people's plight. Barsirian understood he was mourning not just his father, but a symbol of resistance. As he witnessed the suffering of his people, his resolve to honor his father's legacy deepened. The embers of resistance, ignited by his father's defiance, now burned brightly within him. The position of Orkoiyot was earned through lineage, spiritual calling, and leadership. The Nandi, reeling from the loss of Koitalel Arap Samoe, looked to his sons for resistance. Basirian immersed himself in Nandi history, learning governance rituals and strategies. He honed his skills as a warrior and developed his connection to the spiritual realms. The Orkoiyot was a conduit between the physical and spiritual worlds, his pronouncements carrying divine authority. The Orkoiyot held a unique position within Nandi society, embodying the people's will. Basirian, upon assuming the mantle, understood the immense responsibility. He presided over religious ceremonies, settled disputes, and advised warriors. Neighboring tribes recognized his spiritual authority, seeking his counsel. Basirian used his position to advocate for his people's rights and resist colonial policies. Basirian's ascension coincided with escalating tensions between the Nandi and the British. The Nandi, known for their warrior spirit, looked to Basirian for guidance. He balanced diplomacy with growing calls for resistance. Basirian engaged in strategic dialogues with the British and encouraged passive resistance. His leadership provided hope and direction for the Nandi people. Despite Basirian's efforts, the situation with the British deteriorated. The forced recruitment of Nandi men into the carrier corps added fuel to the fire. Secret meetings were held and warriors urged Basirian to sanction rebellion. Basirian understood the futility of conventional war, but recognized the time for diplomacy was ending. The Nandi, their patience exhausted, braced for inevitable confrontation. At the heart of the Nandi protest lay the unresolved issue of land alienation. The British coveted the Nandi's fertile lands for cash crops, relegating them to smaller reserves. The loss of their land was a spiritual and cultural catastrophe. Basirian witnessed the suffering of his people and received countless pleas for intervention. He understood that the land was the foundation of their identity and hope for the future. The Nandi were further burdened by an unjust system of taxation. Unable to pay taxes in cash, many Nandi were forced into colonial labor. Basirian recognized the deep-seated resentment brewing within the Nandi community. He tried to reason with the British authorities, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. The colonial administration remained indifferent to the plight of the Nandi people. A devastating rinderpest outbreak further pushed the Nandi to the brink. The loss of their herds was catastrophic for the pastoralist society. The colonial administration's response was slow and inadequate. The rinderpest outbreak, combined with land alienation and taxation, pushed the Nandi to the breaking point. The stage was set for a confrontation against the forces determined to destroy their way of life. The Nandi protest culminated in 1923 with the Saget Ab Ato ceremony. The British viewed the ceremony with suspicion, fearing it as a rallying point for dissent. The Nandi saw it as an opportunity to unite and resist further encroachment. Basirian, at the center of the brewing storm, balanced upholding traditions with protecting his people. The ceremony took on a somber tone, thick with anticipation and impending confrontation. The colonial administration, determined to prevent rebellion, decided to strike preemptively. They identified Basirian Arap Manye, the Orkoiyot, as the spiritual leader of the Nandi people. On October 16, 1923, British soldiers descended upon Basirian's homestead. They arrived under the cover of darkness, their purpose clear: to silence the voice of Nandi resistance. Basirian had time to escape but chose to remain, facing his captors with dignity. He was arrested without incident, his pleas for his people's rights falling on deaf ears. The arrest of Barsirian Arap Manye sent shockwaves through the Nandi community. The British, believing they had extinguished rebellion, had sown the seeds for future resistance. Barsirian Arap Manye's arrest marked the beginning of a long journey into colonial captivity. The British sought to isolate him, to break his spirit and extinguish the flames of resistance. His initial destination was Meru, a region far removed from Nandi. The arid plains of Meru must have felt like a world away. The journey, undertaken on foot and under armed guard, was grueling. In Meru, Barsirian was confined to a small, sparsely furnished hut. Stripped of his traditional regalia, he wore the coarse garments of a common prisoner. His diet was meager, a far cry from the rich stews of his homeland. Deprived of human interaction, Barsirian found solace in his memories and faith. He knew his people had not forgotten him. Their spirit, like his own, would endure the trials of captivity. As the years turned into a decade, Barsirian's place of confinement shifted, but the underlying message remained the same: isolation, deprivation, and the relentless erosion of hope. He was transferred to Mfangano Island, one of many islands dotting the vast expanse of Lake Victoria. This island, while possessing a certain stark beauty, was known for its harsh living conditions, its isolation from the mainland, a deliberate tactic employed by the colonial authorities to contain political prisoners. Life on Mfangano was a far cry from the lush landscapes and communal harmony of Barsirian's homeland. The island, buffeted by strong winds and prone to periods of drought, offered little in the way of sustenance. The prisoners, drawn from various communities across Kenya, were tasked with backbreaking labor, clearing land, cultivating meager crops, and constructing their own rudimentary shelters. Barsirian, stripped of his leadership role, found himself reduced to a common laborer, his days consumed by the struggle for survival. Yet even in these trying circumstances, his spirit remained unbroken. He shared his meager rations with fellow prisoners, offered words of encouragement to those on the verge of despair, and drew upon his deep reservoir of knowledge to maintain their connection to their cultural heritage. The vastness of Lake Victoria, a constant presence in his life on Mfangano Island, became both a barrier and a source of solace for Barsirian. Its waters, while separating him from his homeland and his people, also reflected the vastness of the sky, a reminder of the interconnectedness of all things, of a world that extended beyond the confines of his captivity. Section 3. The Weight of Silence: Years Lost in Kapsabet. From the isolation of Mfangano Island, Barsirian was transferred yet again, this time to Kapsabet detention camp, a place synonymous with the brutality and injustice of the colonial regime. Kapsabet, located in the heart of Nandi land, was a constant reminder to the Nandi people of their subjugation, a physical manifestation of the power wielded by their colonial masters. The camp, enclosed by high walls topped with barbed wire, housed a diverse group of political prisoners, individuals deemed a threat to the stability of colonial rule. Within its confines, intellectuals, traditional leaders, and those who dared to challenge the legitimacy of British authority were subjected to a regime of physical and psychological torture designed to break their spirit and extinguish any embers of resistance. For Barsirian, being imprisoned so close to his homeland, yet so far removed from the rhythms of Nandi life, was a particularly cruel twist of fate. He could almost feel the presence of his people, hear the echoes of their songs, sense the rhythms of their dances, yet he was separated from them by the impenetrable walls of his confinement. The years spent in Kapsabet were marked by a deafening silence. Communication with the outside world was strictly controlled, letters censored, visits from family and friends rare and closely monitored. The colonial authorities, fearful of Barsirian's enduring influence, sought to isolate him, to break the bonds of kinship and community that sustained him. Section 4. Family torn asunder: the ripple effects of Barsirian's detention. Barsirian Arap. Manye's detention profoundly impacted his family, who navigated life without their patriarch. His wife, Taplalai, bore the brunt of his absence, raising their children alone. She faced scrutiny and harassment from colonial authorities. Despite challenges, she instilled resilience and respect for Nandi heritage in her children. Basirian's children grew up marked by his absence, denied his guidance. Yet they drew inspiration from his sacrifice and commitment to his people. Basirian's detention is a stark reminder of the human cost of colonialism, tearing apart families and communities. Section 1, A Bittersweet Return, Freedom's Uncertain Embrace, 1964. A year of immense change swept across Kenya, the winds of independence ushering in a new era. For Basirian Arap Manyai, it was a release from Kapsabet detention camp to a vastly different world. After decades in captivity, he was a free man, his release a testament to tireless efforts. Stepping out of the vehicle, Basirian felt relief, joy and trepidation in a newly independent Kenya. The rolling hills of Nandi now bore the scars of colonial rule, dotted with tea plantations. The warmth of his family's embrace did little to ease his sense of displacement. His wife Tapalai welcomed him home with love undimmed by years of separation. His grown children greeted him with awe and reverence. Yet, amidst the joy, a sense of melancholy pervaded, recognizing the stolen years. Section 2, The Struggle for Recognition, a hero ignored. Basirian Arap Manyai returned to a Kenya on the cusp of transformation, a nation grappling with the legacy of colonial rule and the challenges of forging a new identity. Yet amidst the euphoria of independence, his sacrifice, his decades of imprisonment in defense of his people's rights, seemed to be fading into obscurity, his story overshadowed by the narratives of those who had risen to prominence during the struggle for independence. The new government, eager to distance itself from the excesses of the colonial era, was hesitant to acknowledge the plight of those who had suffered under British rule. Their focus on national unity and progress rather than on addressing past injustices. Basirian, a living embodiment of colonial oppression, became an uncomfortable reminder of a past they were eager to forget. Despite his status as a symbol of Nandi resistance, Basirian received little in the way of official recognition or support. His pleas for the return of confiscated lands for compensation for the years lost in detention fell on deaf ears. The government, preoccupied with consolidating its power and navigating the complexities of a newly independent nation, seemed content to relegate him to the margins of history, a forgotten hero whose sacrifice had been in vain. This lack of recognition stung, not for any personal gain he sought, but for the injustice it represented, the sense that his people's suffering, their decades-long struggle against colonial rule, had been swept under the rug in the rush to embrace a new era. Basirian, his spirit unbroken by years of imprisonment, refused to be silenced. Section 3, Living in the Shadows, Poverty and Neglect. Freedom for Basirian Arap. Manyai did not translate into comfort. He returned to poverty and neglect, his family's land and livestock confiscated. His homestead, once vibrant, now stood in disrepair. The sounds of community life replaced by silence. Basirian struggled with harsh living conditions and inadequate nutrition. His skills seemed out of place in a modernizing world. His family struggled to make ends meet, his presence a burden. His situation contrasted with the promises of independence. Remembering Basirian Arap Manyai. Basirian Arap Manyai passed away on April 10, 1974, his life a testament to enduring strength. He died a free man, yet the weight of his decades-long imprisonment cast a long shadow. His passing did not elicit the national outpouring of grief expected for such a figure. He was laid to rest in a modest grave in Lemurungeni village, Uasin Gishu County. There is a growing movement to reclaim his legacy and honor his commitment to the Nandi people. Historians and activists are piecing together his life, celebrating his resilience. His story is now being told and retold, ensuring his sacrifices are not forgotten. Monuments have been erected in his honor, his name gracing schools and public spaces. His story inspires future generations to stand up for justice and cultural identity. Section 2. The unfinished struggle. Land rights and historical justice. While the movement to reclaim Bassirian Arap Manié's legacy has gained momentum, the struggle for which he dedicated his life, the struggle for land rights, for cultural preservation and for historical justice remains unfinished. The issues that fueled the Nandi protest of 1923, the very issues that led to Bassirian's decades-long imprisonment, continue to resonate in contemporary Kenya. The legacy of land alienation, a cornerstone of British colonial policy, continues to cast a long shadow over Kenya, fueling social and economic inequalities. Many communities dispossessed of their ancestral lands during the colonial era continue to grapple with poverty, landlessness, and a sense of marginalization. The struggle for land rights, for equitable access to resources, and for recognition of historical injustices remains a contentious issue, often erupting into violence and political instability. The Kenyan government, while acknowledging the need for land reform, has been slow to implement meaningful change, often prioritizing the interests of powerful elites over the needs of marginalized communities. The fight for historical justice, for reparations for the injustices of the past, is often met with resistance, dismissed as a distraction from the challenges of the present. Yet the spirit of Bassirian Arap Manié, his unwavering commitment to his people's rights, his belief in the power of resistance continues to inspire activists, community leaders, and ordinary citizens to demand better, to fight for a more just and equitable society. The struggle for land rights is not just about economics, it is about identity, about belonging, about honoring the sacrifices of those who came before. Section 3. The Spirit of Resistance, Bassirian's Enduring Message. Bassirian Arap Manié's life, though marked by hardship and injustice, carries within it a powerful message of hope, resilience, and the enduring spirit of resistance. His story reminds us that even in the darkest of times, when faced with overwhelming odds, the human spirit can endure, that the fight for freedom and justice is a relay race passed down from one generation to the next. Bassirian's unwavering commitment to his people, his refusal to be cowed by the might of the British Empire, serves as an inspiration to those who continue to challenge oppression in all its forms. His story teaches us that true leadership does not lie in titles or positions of power, but in the courage to stand up for what is right, to speak truth to power, and to never surrender the values that define us. In a world grappling with rising inequality, resurgent nationalism, and the erosion of democratic values, Bassirian Arap Manié's message of resistance resonates with renewed urgency. His story reminds us that the fight for justice is never truly over, that each generation must find its own way to challenge oppression, to dismantle systems of inequality, and to create a more just and equitable world for all. As we remember Bassirian Arap Manié, let us honor his legacy not just with words but with actions, by continuing the struggle for which he dedicated his life, by embracing his spirit of resistance, and by working tirelessly to create a world where the sacrifices he and countless others made will not have been in